You're listening to the GamesIndustry.biz Microcast recorded on Friday the 4th of October 2024. I'm James Batchelor, Editor-in-Chief of GamesIndustry.biz. I'm joined by Head of GamesIndustry.biz, Chris Dring. Chris, I made your mistake this week. I engaged with fanboys on Twitter.
Oh, no.
There's rumours been going that Switch 2 was going to be announced soon.
Yeah.
And so I had thoughts and I shared them. And I had... I ended up in a conversation with an industry peer about whether or not Call of Duty will be on Switch 2. And then we got into speculating whether Game Pass would come to Switch 2. Or I suggested more likely Xbox Cloud Gaming. Someone replied, "That will never happen," to which I foolishly responded,
"Oh, no."
Well, they said that about Mario and Sonic appearing in the same video game.
Oh, dear. What are you bringing up? What have you got on? By the way, we're in person today.
We're in person today.
I can see James on his phone bringing up tweets. What you got?
The reply to me was, yeah, but Nintendo wasn't even the one that developed or even published that Mario and Sonic game. They only gave them the right to use Mario. Nintendo solely makes their hardware, numbnuts. Now, I could have replied that actually Nintendo has a fairly good software business as well as its hardware.
Oh, yeah, moderately
successful software business.
Yeah.
Plus all the IP and merchandising. I could, and I in fact did, reply that Nintendo did publish that game, albeit in Korea and Japan, and even if it was only a licensing deal, it would be like one of the most significant licensing deals it was at the time, because you've got a company loaning its most valuable IP to a company that was for over a decade.
Sonic's in Smash Brothers.
That's... Oh. But I mainly bring this up because I loved the use of the word numbnuts. if we could agree that the most harsh thing you can say on social media is numbnuts, the games industry, nay, the world, would be a much better place.
Yeah, it would be. Well, okay. I'm not sure what numbnuts means.
Neither do I, but it just doesn't sound as terrible as some of the things you see on social media. But yeah, I need to up my game if I'm going to get to the level where you are, where you've got like hundreds and hundreds of people telling you that you're a corporate shill for both platform holders, both Sony and Microsoft, at the same time.
That is always fun. I have become I still fall into the trap of replying every now and again, but I do mostly not to reply now.
Yeah,
it's when I did a tweet recently, I tell you what, and it's even, I'm going to be talking about this later on. There's certain things that fans obsess with, and because we live this, we do the numbers and we look at analyze stuff, we can sort of go, no, that's not how it works. So the people, if take Astrobot, I talked about Astrobot on the podcast. I also talked about it on Twitter about how everyone was comparing it to the launch of God of War, and on certain, not everyone, by the way, very small minority of people. And I'm saying that this is not how those games work. That's not what Astrobot is, and that's not how its sales trajectory will go, because even if it's not the genre, it's not the target audience, things are very different. And explaining that, it was because I was a Sony fanboy, excusing Astrobot's terrible sales, which is... None of that's true. There's nothing true in that sentence whatsoever. No. And I eventually had to duck out of it.
The only true part of that game, the only true part of that sentence is there is a game called Astrobot. That is it. That is the extent of truth in that.
Yeah.
Glorious. We have got a few stories to be talking about before we dive into our main topic that we haven't quite got time to deal with in as much depth as we hope. The first one actually was going to be our main topic. Epic is suing Google again.
Yeah.
And this time combining it with Samsung. So... this is over Samsung's auto blocker. It's kind of, Epic are positioning it as a kind of a partnership between Google and Samsung to block alternative app stores. Auto blocker is a feature on Samsung phones that automatically prevents you from downloading any apps that aren't from either Google Play Store or Samsung Galaxy Store. Now, it was introduced October last year. Originally, it was optional, so you could still sideload apps if you wanted. Apps like, for example, the recently launched Epic Game Store on mobile. Since June, or maybe July, it's been default as on. You can turn it off, but its default is on. Epic is taking Google and Samsung to court over this. They were pushing for a jury trial because they did so well against Google in the jury trial last year. They're actually claiming that this is kind of undermining the legal win, the jury win that they got end of last year, that this is anti-competitive, the usual thing. We were going to try and get an expert on to just discuss this from the kind of mobile markets perspective. Unfortunately, that person wasn't available. But
well, he was available. We're just recording too early.
We're just recording too early. How dare we record in the morning? To be fair, no, it is schedule conflict. So yeah, it's another Epic lawsuit.
Yeah, I mean, here's my thing with this whole conversation. Obviously, loading on app stores onto Extra, having app stores, having access to other app stores is obviously a good thing, and I think it builds up competition, it makes things more competitive. But I don't think Google Store or the App Store have are under any threat. You've seen what's happened with Epic on PC, right? PC is an open platform. Steam's there. Steam is dominant. Steam is still dominant. You saw the recent news with Ubisoft are going, yeah, we're going to back away from being Epic Games Store. So you're starting to see that. I don't think Epic Games Store, even the Microsoft Store, whatever, is going to be a threat to Apple or Google's main stores. Where I think where this genuine change is most interesting is it's enabling developers to sell directly. Yeah. So you bought the game through the App Store, and then they can start selling stuff afterwards directly through their own, whatever their community system platform is. And I think that is interesting. That's good for developers. It's potentially beneficial to the whole mobile games ecosystem, at least from the developer perspective, if not necessarily Apple. But obviously Epic is the one that's fighting this and trying to make all this reality. But I do believe the real benefit to the mobile market in this is in what developers can do, rather than Epic being able to sell mobile games too. Yeah,
no, I agree. It's the outcome that is the more benefit for the wider developers. It kind of tied in though with another Epic story. So this came out on the Monday 30th of September. The next day was Unreal Fest, and in his opening speech, Tim Sweeney said that the company is financially sound. The exact quote was, "We spent the last year rebuilding and really executing solidly on all fronts. I'm happy to tell you now that the company is financially sound and that Fortnite and the Epic Games Store have hit new records in concurrency and success." Now, a fair number of people pointed out that yes, the company is financially sound because it laid off, or partly because it laid off 830 people last year. And again, like going back to the litigation, the cost of this, it's been a 4-year legal battle against Google and Apple. I think the Apple one is still going in some territories, and they're still kind of fighting and appealing and so forth. And now you've got another Google lawsuit on the. These things are costly. Even Fortnite money doesn't, only covers so many legal costs.
Yeah, well, probably covers every legal cost in the world, actually, Fortnite money.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I know, but that doesn't. I think it's the same with every company, right? They all spend a lot of money at a time, trying to accelerate and deliver growth. And the industry did, for loads of different reasons. We've talked about it loads in this podcast. That growth hasn't come, and companies now have to right-size themselves, and that includes closing the things they may have invested in. It includes downsizing stuff, merging things together, and it's resulted in these masses of layoffs. And Epic isn't the only company that I've heard that thinks they're through it now. Particularly the big companies. I think Microsoft believe it's through it. It's got through the worst of that turmoil, and they got to the point where we've right-sized. We are now ready for what this industry, and I think I think that bodes well. We've talked about it before. This pain that the games industry is going through is going to continue, but we are going to see 2025 will have a lot of good news in it as well, and we're starting to see a couple of those positive stories eke through, but there will be a lot of good news to offset the bad. But it's going to be a transition. We're not going to suddenly flick a switch and everybody's happy and everything's growing again, but certain parts of the industry is growing, and I think some of these bigger companies are probably through the worst of it, and investment will hopefully follow.
Yeah, that's encouraging for like the wider health of the industry, because as you say, if the larger companies can right-size themselves, that minimizes the impact on the overall global workforce. Like, you're absolutely right. We're going to still see some companies having a problem. We're seeing it this week. Like, more companies are kind of making small numbers of layoffs. But when and this is absolutely not to kind of diminish the impact it has on the, say, 5-10 people it's affected, but it's a different impact on the industry overall compared to, say, the 830 from Epic or the nearly 2,000 from Microsoft. Like, when you stop having these mass layoffs.
But I still think there's still too many games. There's still not enough money going around. There's still people that have, like, maybe they had a 2-year runway with the funding they've got, and that runway's coming to an end, and they're going to find it hard to find money. But there is still money out there. We just reported literally hours ago, really, was the Mario and Rabbids team have reformed with a Red Dead Redemption lead designer and writer to create a new AAA studio, making original IP, part funded by Crafton and One Up Ventures. So there is still, these stories are still happening. There's still investment happening, and it's just it's and that's great. It's nice to be able to write about that. I actually put in the funding tag on the GI on the GamesIndustry.biz website, which I haven't done for a long time. It's only the layoff tag that we have to put in. So there is still some of that, and we're going to start seeing more of it. But there's still a lot of companies struggling. There's not as much work out there, but I don't know. There's a few green shoots starting to show, and I think see even more going forward.
I'm going to change my running order slightly, because one of the other conversations I was going to have was another story that happened this week was Future Publishing in the UK, major magazine publisher, is closed Play, which is its PlayStation-centric games magazine. It was kind of a spiritual successor to the official PlayStation magazine in the UK, which Future either lost or dropped the license to back in 2021. Combined, the two magazines have been running for 29 years, and it's closing. This kind of follows, obviously, August, we had Game Informer closed after 33 years. I think in the UK, we've now only got like 3 regular new games magazines. So it's Edge, PC Gamer, and Retro Gamer. So again, evidence of the ongoing pain that the industry is going to go through.
Well, yeah, but that's more to do with, I'm despair. I don't despair, actually. The media situation is really tough, right?
Yeah.
Because the internet, the worst thing the internet's done with the media is it's basically taught people not to pay for their media.
Yeah.
Right? And Play is an example of that. You picked on PC Gamer, Retro Gamer, and Edge. Those have quite a distinct voice and a thing about them, right? So if you are, you're that sort of prosumer industry audience, the Edge sort of appeals to that industry fan audience. Edge speaks that audience, and it does stuff in Edge that you wouldn't get online, because it wouldn't do the traffic.
Yeah.
And I subscribe to Doctor Who magazine, and in Doctor Who magazine there is you'll always get something like, here's an interview with the second unit director on an episode that was filmed in 1975, which only about 5,000 people are interested in, but they'll pay £10 a month to read that, right?
And you should know.
That's where the media is sort of heading. Where I worry is like the big media, because you can sit there and say, subscribe and you can get ad free and you can get an extra 10 or 20 minutes of a podcast and stuff, and that works for the smaller organizations that just need to it can work quite comfortably for a small group of people. But when it comes to the big media giants, that's a struggle, because they're so dependent on programmatic and traffic, and Google and algorithm changes can screw all that up, and it feels really volatile and quite frightening, actually, that suddenly Google can just change the algorithm and kill a business. And I despair at that. You really need to get your readers to pay, and how do you do that? And in a way, the magazines was a way we used to do it.
Yeah.
And the magazines, I don't think, can work. I've never read official PlayStation magazine. I've never read Play, so I have no idea. But if it's sort of reviews and guides and sort of previews and stuff, that's all online.
Yeah.
And it's free. So what can you offer that you wouldn't get online? Go niche, go specialist. But yeah, I always just get quite frustrated with the media. And the thing is, it actually creates I don't think any journalist likes this, but it creates some media naturally ends up trying to be a bit sensational's a bit of a toxic word, I think, but sort of they're trying to create a bit of drama to get people reading, understandably, because traffic is so important. And one of the things that actually really annoyed me, it didn't really annoy me, it annoyed me a little bit, was the Chris Deering quote from like a couple of weeks ago that blew up. The Chris Deering, the former European president of PlayStation, they gave a quote in Simon Parkin's wonderful podcast, but you can listen to after you've listened to ours, and My Perfect Console. And in that podcast, he said he was actually trying to be reassuring. He was saying that for all the people that have been laid off that are struggling to find work in video games, that there's going to be plenty of work for you in the future. If you make games, if you're good at programming, if you do these sort of things, you don't have anything to worry about long term. But right now, you might need to try and find something else to do, while you wait for the market to recover. It's not too dissimilar, actually, to what Gina Jackson said when she was on our podcast talking about what students can do. You maybe use your skills in other ways.
Yeah.
And this is where he went wrong, right? The statement is perfectly reasonable. And then he said, I don't know, sit on the beach for a year or become an Uber driver. Now, he was just throwing around sort of random things that you could do, right? He wasn't trying to actually suggest games programs should become Uber drivers.
Yeah.
And there's an element of, he's of a different class and a different era. So maybe, it's a bit. But then, of course, the headline became, former PlayStation boss says game developers should become Uber drivers, laid off games. And it was like, that isn't really the heart of what he was saying. But obviously that's the thing that was going to get the clicks and the conversation. And I hate all that. I really do. And I'm glad I work for a business title where we don't have to play that game. And that is, but I think that can change if, readers just start paying for the things that you like to read.
Yeah, it's so difficult though, isn't it? Like, as you say, like I do worry for the larger sites who are trying to do these kind of, Patreons and support us programs and so forth, because they've had like their audiences, they've built audiences over decades, and like really loyal audiences. We know that there's not as much crossover between one site and another site as you'd think there would be, but those sites, like that audience is used to it receiving that content for free. It's exactly what you're saying. Like if you've delivered something for free for years, there's a really difficult balance to strike between you want to offer them something that's worth paying for without overworking your team, because the team's already working on so many things.
They've got to have no other option for it as well. Like, so I've often said this. So if anyone from like N Life Media is listening to this, Time Extension, which is their retro game site, I would pay for that. Like, if you turn that off, like, no one can go on it, paywall it, I will pay money for it. It's a great site. It's very specialist. It writes about stuff that I'm into, and I don't get that from IGN. I don't get that from Eurogame. I don't get it anywhere else. I can only get it from Time Extension. So I will pay Time Extension money to read that site, because they offer a service that other sites don't offer. But if some other favourite site, if Video Games Chronicle, which I love, Andy's site, if they were to charge, I'll go, yeah, but I can get the news anywhere, right? And I can get those reviews. And they don't offer anything. They offer some. They break some exclusive stories, but they always end up somewhere else. And that is the thing. You've got to try for those sort of things to work. And of course, look, VGC actually has a Patreon, and they've got extra, and their podcast is entertaining and fun. They do some extra bits and bobs and that. So there is some money that, and they're a small site, so they can make things work. But certainly the bigger ones.
All of this with the backdrop of companies are, and have been for years, increasingly talking directly to consumers. Companies have their own editorial outlets, like the PlayStation blog, Xbox Wire, stuff like like that.
How is Play going to compete? Play's biggest competition is PlayStation itself.
Yeah,
right. And it's I thought it was quite telling that when Xbox announced all its stuff at Summer Games Fest, their big Xbox Summer Showcase, none of the sites had interviews with any of the developers. Xbox site did.
Yeah,
and that's actually not good.
No,
you don't want you want people to ask more not tough questions, but questions that perhaps talk about things that they know gamers are interested in and want to know. And even if the answers, we can't talk about it right now, but we'll talk about it later. Like, that's information that people want to know. But anyway.
Yeah.
There's
a difference.
We could talk about the media subject all year.
We could, but we shan't. We'll go on to more news that we're not going to talk about. You mentioned Microsoft, actually. There is more Microsoft news this week. It's kind of tenuously games related. HoloLens. Do you remember HoloLens? I
remember HoloLens, yeah.
Well, forget it, because HoloLens 2 has been discontinued. They're going to stop producing it in 2027.
I didn't realise there was a HoloLens 2. I never really engaged with HoloLens 1, so I wouldn't have better kept up with the story.
No, fair enough. HoloLens 2 is being discontinued. It's they're going to stop producing it in 2027. They are going to stop software support, and they already said back in 2022 that there's not going to be a HoloLens 3. So the HoloLens thing has finished. However,
did it end on a cliffhanger?
It did not end. No. However, Microsoft has said it's still committed to, I think it's the HoloLens IVAS, which is like the military version, because they've got that massive contract with the US government and so forth. So, I mean, I just, obviously HoloLens never turned out to be a gaming device in the way that it was originally pitched. I mean, I say the word HoloLens, I always automatically picture like the chap playing Minecraft on his coffee table.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
which it's a really cool idea. I once tried a HoloLens on. I was at an XR AR summit, and it was like really huge, big, bulky headset, like bigger than PlayStation VR.
I've used it as well. I used it at it was I had to wait in line to use it. It was a Halo experience. I had to wait in line because Kanye West was got a exclusive tour of it first, and there was another event I went to where it was a lovely novelty, and I thought it was very clever tech. But yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Clearly was never meant for games.
It's not good. I don't think AR is going to be central to games, anything other than a gimmick for games, until AR is a mainstream proposition. Like, I've been seeing adverts for the Ray-Ban Meta glasses, which honestly looks stupid. But as and when those are more affordable, more capable, maybe we'll saw games that maybe you'll be able to play Minecraft on your coffee table then.
I'm all over AR when the glasses can tell me the names of people who come up to me and go, "Hi Chris, I've not seen you for ages. Yes. How are you doing?" And I'm sitting there going, I would buy it, but I don't care how much it is.
I don't want Watch Dogs on AR. I want Watch Dogs' face scanner. I want to know name, last interaction, and just a fun icebreaker that we can use to get conversation going. Yes, I absolutely desperately need that. Last news story to touch on was Palworld is coming to mobile.
That one.
That one. A lot of the news obviously is, in the wake of the Pokemon Palworld lawsuit, it's like, well, the lawsuit's going to be going for a long time. Like, they're not going to stop doing business with Palworld. They're not going to stop growing Palworld because they face a potential lawsuit. Pocket Pair has actually licensed with Krafton to make a mobile version. The mobile version is going to be developed by PUBG Studios. We don't know if it's going to be like a kind of a direct one-to-one. I imagine it'd be quite close.
I need to. What I don't know is Palworld's numbers, because I always got the impression, because the reaction, some people liked it, but there was a lot of people that thought it was a bit, some of the critical. I only saw the critical reaction, which was relatively like, this isn't great, and also it's caused this huge surge in interest. And then honestly, up until Nintendo sued it, I've forgotten it. Every time I go, there was Palworld in January. Like, I've almost forgotten it was there. So I'd be interested to know. Like, I appreciate that Sony's on board and they've got loads of big partnerships now to try and take that on. But I do wonder if it was a bit of a. It's interesting to see if Palworld, was it a flash in the pan? Was it a moment where everyone got very excited about something and then got pretty bored of it quite quickly, or are we actually looking at a new franchise here? My skeptic brain is going, I think it might be the former, but
I think the mobile version would be really good, like kind of testing ground for that, because it's currently it's on PC and on Xbox. It's just come to PlayStation, although not in Japan yet. But once it's on mobile's obviously a much larger audience. And Roblox, Fortnite, those kind of grew on mobile. Minecraft grew on mobile. Like, they're still kind of quite console. Some of those are quite console centric, but I think mobile, with the larger audience it opens, if Palworld can gain traction there, then potential.
It speaks in markets, doesn't it? And the type of game it is might do well there. I mean, the game's obviously been a hit. It's made the developer a load of money. I'm not questioning its success. It's longevity. That's the thing. A lot of people talk about what defines success, and it's like how it's longevity really. It's how long can these things. Everyone can make a load of money very quickly, but does it have the legs of Pokemon? I don't know.
Cut to an episode of the Microcast in 2028, and we're like, hey Chris, remember Palworld?
It's the new Fortnite, isn't it?
On to our main topic. Main topic is kind of a nebulous one. We're talking about adaptations. There's a couple of things that brought this up. The main thing is that you had a great interview with a new publishing label earlier this week, Big Fan Games.
I say new. I often don't know how to phrase things like this, because Big Fan Games is Good Shepherd, right? Which is the publisher that Devolver bought in 2021, and it's Good Shepherd. But Good Shepherd's quite similar to Devolver in some ways. It's a publisher of indie games, and I've gone, right, what's the identity of Good Shepherd? Now, a couple of things Good Shepherd's done in the past includes a Hellboy game and a John Wick game. They brought their business development lead, Amanda, is from Lionsgate, is a movie industry person. They brought in a new person called Link, and he's leading the business, also from games, but is very versed in licensed games and that kind of stuff. They've gone, we're going to go down the route of licensed games. And they rebranded it. They've got a refocus. So it is new. It's also not new. So it's I get this a lot. I've got a new studio, and it's not a new studio. It's a different studio, a different name, a different direction. So it's a weird. I don't really know how to phrase it, but you're right. It is a new. It's a thing that's doing licensed games.
It's an announcement. Yeah. It's an announcement. So the idea of this indie publisher or indie style publisher that is dedicated entirely to adaptations. I find that interesting because over the years, IP adaptations have always been primarily skewed more towards kind of the AAA era, the AAA end. Certainly since I'd say, if you go back far enough, there were so many licensed games that done by all range of developers, the movie tie-ins, the little side-scrolling platformers. I would argue since, say, Batman Arkham Asylum, perhaps, they've been viewed as proper big AAA productions. We are at risk, and this is the thing, I think all of this conversation, we are at risk of generalising. We are, yes. Games, because somebody was pointing out to me about how, you love this, you're a James Bond fanatic, James, right? Everything or Nothing, right? Which is like a blockbuster James Bond film. It's the fifth Pierce Brosnan film. And it's got, the cast of that's astonishing, right? And the amount of money Ian must have thrown at that. And that was, 2004? 2000, was that earlier than that? No, about 2003 through 4, yeah. Yeah, so, and that's quite, so everyone goes, licensed games have become more of a thing in the last 15, 20, further back, right? They've always been relative, and even in the 90s when we go, it was, these people go games
largely treated as merchandise. But you think about the Aladdin game and the Mickey game and the Star Wars Dark Forces and Goldeneye. Obviously, there's an awful lot of exceptions to the rule that licensed games always. But I know what you mean. There was a lot of AAA games that were like, you know, all the Marvel games that Sega had and stuff, which were basically treated as movie-like merchandise.
Okay, I'll rephrase. There haven't been as many exceptions over the years that were indie titles.
Yeah.
You've named two of them, John Wick Hex and the Hellboy game that Good Shepherd did. I would also add in, it had a lot of money behind it, but Delilah Studios' Disney Illusion Island.
Yeah.
You've got Disney entrusting the Mickey Mouse IP, its biggest IP, to a handful of people in a garage.
And there's a game that have you heard of Mars Attacks?
No.
It's a new indie game based on Mars Attacks.
No way.
And it was I was only introduced it because I'm doing some stuff for Comic-Con, and I was shown it like yesterday, and it's IGN's got a little video on it, so it's been out there, it's been promoted as part of Gamescom announcements and all this sort of thing. But it just made me go, but we're starting to see more of this, right?
Yeah.
You know what you're saying, which is like publishers and going to indie developers, like IP going to indie developers, particularly with IP that's a little dormant.
Yeah.
You said, I know Mickey is an iconic Disney IP, but there's not really been a big Mickey thing for a long, long time. And Mars Attacks, come on. Even John Wick, which is it's in the article that I did with Big Fan, who are the Devolver team. That was an indie film back when that game was commissioned. So you've got so there are these carry on, James. I've interrupted your flow.
You have interrupted my flow, but you give me another thought. Is that I'm going to go on a slight tangent here. Is like we've seen over the years that video game adaptations of dormant IP, or at least less known IP, or small IP, or less known IP, perhaps more region-specific IP, can actually grow up into something massive. And the example I'm obviously thinking of is The Witcher. Now, I'm not saying CDP was an indie when they started making the Witcher games, but they weren't the biggest studio. And blimey, the first two Witcher games weren't the biggest games. But Metro. Yeah. The Witcher 3, Metro. The Witcher 3 became so popular that it is undeniably a massive factor in Netflix making a Witcher series and the book sales really taking off. Metro, I guarantee those have sold the book, done massive wonders for the books. Like, games have the power to, when adapted well, to grow an IP beyond what it could have been.
Yeah, well, it's the same. It's actually the same with film, right? You look about, this is the thing, it's in the piece, like, it's hard to find a film that isn't based on something. It's really hard, or a TV show.
Yeah.
Whether it's like we're based on the comic from that My Chemical Romance singer, or even was it the film Fall Guy that came out earlier in the year, which didn't do very well, but it's based on a 1980s US TV show, right? And that's like in film, almost everything's an adaptation. Something like the top 20 out of the 25 films, 21 of them is a sequel or an adaptation or something. And that is and in games, that's not the case.
Yeah.
But it's becoming increasingly more and more of these adaptations. The thing is, with adaptations, obviously, that's all happening on the backdrop of Star Wars Outlaws.
Yeah.
Right? And on the backdrop of Avatar, which were big AAA license games that missed. And obviously, there are AAA license games that don't miss. Hogwarts Legacy is a big glaring exception. But there's so many now that are going, Avengers didn't do it and Suicide Squad didn't do it.
But then again, this comes into is the IP dormant or at least less active? So Rob Fahey, our contributing editor, wrote a column about Outlaws on, I say Friday, today is Friday, so it'll be up on the site by the time you hear this. And he was talking about like Outlaws, he's not convinced that Outlaws' poor performance is entirely Ubisoft's fault. It may be down to Disney's mismanagement or oversaturation of the Star Wars thing, which is something we've said on the Microcast as well. But he gave the example of Hogwarts Legacy. Harry Potter, while the IP never went away, like, there hasn't been, the Fantastic Beasts films didn't do particularly well, and they haven't made one of those in years. The original films were, well over 10 years ago. There've been no new books. There've been no massive new entries. There's a few mobile titles like, Hogwarts Mystery and so forth. So Hogwarts Legacy was the first major video game in that franchise in years. And so it was something that fans were ready for because there was appetite for it. Whereas Outlaws follows in the footsteps of the hugely popular Lego Star Wars, the almost as popular Jedi Survivor, Jedi Fallen Order.
Let's rephrase that. they did quite well, Jedi Survivor. It wasn't Lego Star Wars numbers.
Okay. But apparently it did better than Outlaws.
Yeah.
And they're like, and the wider IP, it follows The Acolyte, which got cancelled after one season. You've had Andor, you've had Ahsoka, you've had lots of Mandalorian, you've had Boba Fett. Can you tell I've been binging on Disney Plus? It's,
some of those did well. Right?
Yeah.
This is the thing. This is why I find this conversation really hard, because it's a bit like, Rob's right. The Star Wars franchise has had its real big ups and downs, right? And the Acolyte, which I've only watched some of so far, it seemed okay to me, but it didn't win. It was fans didn't seem to like it very much. But Andor was a masterpiece, right?
Yeah.
And then so I didn't like the Ahsoka series, but it's got this ups and downs. But there are hits, and the last two Star Wars games, Jedi Survivor didn't miss. It did pretty well. And Lego Star Wars, okay, the Lego license is slightly different, but that did really, really well as well. So it's almost like I'd love for us to very neatly go, what works in adaptations is this, and this. But it's so nuanced. There is Amanda, who's incredibly smart, was saying in our interview with Big Fan, was saying that there's just an art to it, right? And it's not just a case of being able to just go, oh, it's Star Wars plus Ubisoft open world equals millions.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, it's the games like this don't print money in the way that they used to.
Yeah. Well, and you have to get it right. The game has to be right. The pitch has to be right. You have to get the fans on board. It's really, really, really difficult. And it's interesting. I saw on Twitter, actually, I think it was last night, there was an article about how movie studios are going out there trying to get fans in early on projects to tell them, no, don't do that. Right? So if there's going to be a controversy, they know about it well before.
Depends on the fans, I'll be honest. I remember listening to I'm going to slight tangent here, but I remember, but in terms of getting fans involved, I remember listening to a podcast around blockchain and crypto and when all that came out, and talking about shared story settings and the idea of if fans owned individual characters or settings or whatever. And the person, the expert on this podcast, is saying, imagine if the fans owned elements of Star Wars and decided what was and wasn't canon. That's the worst idea ever.
Yeah, well, but the thing is, it's a divided audience, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about Star Wars. Like, I'm a Doctor Who fan. It goes even further back than Star Wars, right? There are Doctor Who fans that believe Doctor Who died in 1986, right?
Yeah.
1987. But there's also Doctor Who fans that believe it died with David Tennant, and there's those that believe it died with Matt Smith, and there are those. But then there's those new audiences, the young people that have discovered the new series that I believe never was engaged with it before at all. And it's like, and then you've got to try and you go, oh, we're gonna let the fans decide what's good and what's like. But you've got all of these, and I hate to use the terms like woke fans, for instance, that love the modern day era, which I do. And then there's those that go, oh no, they've ruined our, and you've got that challenge with adaptations where you could get the fact what Gen Z like and what millennials like and what Gen X like. It's so different, and particularly, and we live in an aging population, right? So and a great example being Star Wars. Everyone seems to there's this I don't know if this is true, right? There's lots of people that seem to think the prequels now are good, right? And it's like, oh, it's people who grew up with the prequels.
There's nostalgia for the prequels.
Yeah.
I don't know if people think they're good.
I know, that's what I mean. Like, I love watching Obi-Wan and seeing Ewan McGregor and stuff like that. But I'm not going to pretend that I thought those three movies I watched in the 90s when I was a kid growing up were good.
Yeah.
I liked the first one a lot when I first saw it, but every time we watch it now, I'm like, Jesus. But but I think when we were talking about adaptations, there is, I think, an opportunity in video games for us to engage in older IP and things that we can sort of base stuff on that potentially give it a bit of a leg up. And here's the thing: there's a great, particularly something like The Witcher or Mars Attack. Suddenly, the game can be the new thing.
Yeah.
Right. And you talk about that, the fifth Pierce Brosnan movie, right? And it's like we got to the point now where the game can be the latest thing in that story.
Yeah. Blimey, given how long we're waiting for the new James Bond to be unveiled, IO's game is probably going to be the next James Bond thing.
Yes, exactly. And we are the biggest entertainment medium. We are rivaling audiences now. So it is a thing. But I don't know. I think when it comes to sort of video games as merchandise, as a bit of promotion for films, that's where games like Fortnite and the metaverse sort of online live service games come in, really. But you have to get the game. The game has to match. Everything has to come together, right?
Yeah.
It can't be like they call this. She used the word. Amanda used the term RFP process, which is the process of someone going, "Hey, we'd like someone to make a game based on Iron Man," and loads of developers pitch the idea, and that becomes an assignment. And he said what it needs to be is a developer going, I've got a great idea for a Doctor Who game.
Yeah.
And then that is where that starts. It's a developer passionate about something. And then you go to big fan, or to be fair, Amanda says, you just hit up movie studios on LinkedIn and go, hey, can we get this IP? And the movie studios, oh, you want to work with that? That's great. We'd love you to get work with that. So it's interesting. I think there's definitely opportunity. You mentioned some of the big ones. There's Cyberpunk is an IP, right? There's lots of wonderful opportunities. And in fact, oddly, CD Projekt's a really great advert for what you can do with largely either small or forgotten IP and how you can make something of it. But at the same time, as Star Wars shown, as Avengers shown, as Avatar shown, as Suicide Squad has shown, as Gotham Knights or whatever has shown, it's not bankable.
No,
it's got to be. It's not a guarantee.
I'm really intrigued to see what Big Fan do. I'm looking forward to seeing which IP they secure.
6 games apparently. They've got 6 games.
I'm intrigued to know which 6 they are. I think that's all of the time we've got for the main topic. We are probably running out of time, and you and I have other things to be doing today. So I do have one last, and I can confidently ask this week. What do the numbers mean?
You can confidently ask it. I'll tell you what the numbers mean. The numbers mean that we will forever call this. What do the numbers mean? We did a poll last week. We had people out there. I say out there, it's in the company that believe our segment is called by the numbers, but it's not. It's called What Do the Numbers Mean? And I actually thought, what, By the Numbers is a great name. Let's put it to a vote, and we put it up on Twitter last week on my Twitter feed, and it's What Do the Numbers Mean? Is the name of the segment. It was quite close. It was 56% in favour of What Do the Numbers Mean? But here we are.
Great, right. Well, the name's settled then. Mm-hmm. What have you got for me this week?
It's the thing. I'm going to try and sort of deviate away from just doing it like what came out last week and how well did it do. But I am going to do that this week. The big game, for me, because I'm a Nintendo fanboy, is The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, which is the Zelda starring 2D proper full Zelda game that came out last week. It's an interesting one because it's been a bit of a quiet year for Nintendo. PlayStation, it's been quiet for Nintendo. They've done a lot of remasters and a few remakes, and there's been a few sort of niche releases. This is probably the biggest one in its year, but I think I need to clarify, this is not Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, which do these massive mega numbers. It's not that kind of game. So what I've done is I've compared the launch of Echoes of Wisdom to Link's Awakening from 2019, which is the same art style.
That makes sense.
I also decided to sort of get Skyward Sword up, because Skyward Sword is all 3D Zelda, the HD version. It's a 3D Zelda game that came out on Switch.
Yeah.
It's a remaster, so it's not as big as the Breath of the Wild games. It's not. I just thought it might be an interesting one, because Skyward Sword, the key thing is, Link's Awakening came out in 2019, is what I like to call the before times. And in 2019, the games industry was still, in the UK, for these sort of games, was still physical. And to be fair, Nintendo is still physical now. Skyward Sword came out in 2021, and it's sort of, the pandemic accelerated digital there quite a bit. One thing I want to say, Nintendo don't share digital numbers. No. I don't have digital data at all. I think that's okay, because Switch is still a very, very physical machine.
They don't even share them with their financial results. Like you'll get like total sales for a game. And you'll get the ratio, but they never really go into much more detail beyond that.
If you look at GSD's data or Sakana's data, the one missing is Nintendo.
Yeah.
There's lots of smaller companies that are missing that release one game every few years. But when it comes to big AAA studios, it's Nintendo that's missing, and it is a bit frustrating. But at the moment, we can still talk about it broadly, because Switch is still a heavily physical machine, particularly compared to their rivals. Anyway. Back to Echoes of Wisdom. For starters, I looked at the UK. It's the first data to come in is the UK. And the UK is not a great market for Switch. It's done very well in the UK, but considering Switch is dominant and like the best-selling games console in almost every market it's in, and in the UK it isn't, it sort of gives you an idea of that. But compared to Link's Awakening, the 2019 remake, Echoes of Wisdom did 14% fewer at launch. I think when you factor in digital, because there's been digital accelerations in 2019, we're probably looking at about the same. That's my estimate. When you factor in, you look at Skyward Sword from 2021, it's down 16%. Again, Skyward Sword is a 3D Zelda. 3D Zeldas do a lot better than 2D Zeldas, blah, blah, blah. Across Europe data is early. Like, not everything is in, not every retailer is in. So when I do this data at this time, I'm very wary of this. And also, Germany isn't in, and Germany is like the second biggest market for Nintendo across Europe after France. Across Europe, Echoes of Wisdom down 15%. if you exclude Germany, and Skyward Sword it's up 2%, excluding Germany. Again, I think we're probably looking at a similar-ish performance to that. One of the things I was going to mention earlier about fanboys, there's a few reports going up about Echoes of Wisdom sales that are sort of coming out a little bit, that are appearing on fan sites. I've looked at the comments. There's a lot of people that are going, Switch has got a much bigger install base today than 2019 than it did. Much bigger install base than 2019. So surely the sales should be much, much better. If there's any sort of fans that listen to this rather than industry people, I want to say that isn't quite how it works. Because earlier on in a console cycle, yes, there are fewer players, but there's also fewer games.
Yeah.
So the competitive landscape is smaller. Yes, the potential audience is also smaller, but you will often see games do extremely well, even competitively with like late generation releases, early in a cycle, because there's not a lot of games out. They all rush out to buy that game.
So Echoes of Wisdom comes out with 8 years of backlog games.
And tons of Zelda games, and loads of Zelda-like games, but also there's people who bought the console in the first 2-3 years. They might not be playing it anymore. It's all about what's the engaged audience. It's not like for like. So using install base as a sort of example for this. Here's the thing: if you said to me, James, before, this is the most alarming thing for me. If you said to me last week, how well do you think Echoes of Wisdom was going to do? This is roughly what I'd have estimated, I'm terrified to estimate these days, because normally I go, I think it will do this, and it either does much worse, or much better.
There we go. It's not mismanagement of Disney's mismanagement of Star Wars. It's you. Your prediction killed Outlaws.
Well, no, but it's true. Like, I thought Outlaws would do a lot better than it. I couldn't believe how badly they did. But at the same time, I knew Warhammer Space Marine 2 was going to do well, but I didn't expect it was going to do that well. Yeah. And so you've got this sort of, and here's a Zelda game that's done roughly what Zelda games do, which it's like blows my mind. Oh my God, it's the challenge you've got when you base how you think a game's going to perform on historical data. Anyway, I've talked about the UK and Europe. It's down slightly, right? But with digital, might be about the same. It's an estimate. In Japan, it is up substantially. So the launch of Echoes of Wisdom is up 41%, 42% nearly over Link's Awakening, and it's up 26% over Skyward Sword. It's been a hit in Japan, that game. And I think to the point where, if you look at global sales for the game, I believe it's probably the best-selling 2D Zelda game we've ever seen. So again, different level to Breath of the Wild. Tears of the Kingdom, 10 million in a weekend, right? It's nowhere near that scale. But I think it's done pretty well, and I think it sort of shows that there is still an audience of people engaged on the Switch platform, even at this stage. But I do get a sense that it's certainly not, if this was the one big Switch game this year, in a year full of remakes and remasters, and it does, pretty much what the 2D Zelda games do, I think there's an indicator here that Nintendo might be the time, Nintendo, to announce what you've got coming next, and hopefully in the next few weeks we'll get something. I hope so.
I hope so. If only because it will give us something even meatier to discuss on the next Microcast.
Yeah, indeed.
So that is all we've got time for. Thank you so much, Chris, for the number segment. I always learn for that. It's always nice when you store this up rather than like spamming us with stats on the team Slack. So.
I still do it sometimes.
You do?
What was one yesterday? Rayman was the best-selling UK PlayStation 1 game.
I still can't get my head around that.
I couldn't get my head around that. I messaged GFK and said, are you sure Rayman was the best-selling game on PlayStation 1 in the UK? And it's because it was bundled.
Right.
Heavily bundled.
That makes sense.
And the other one was, you know what? Every single PlayStation platform, except for PS1 and PS Vita, the best-selling game on it is a GTA game.
Yeah, that does make sense. Like, there's always been a historical link between those two platforms. But, well, okay, there we go. Bonus numbers. There we go. Thank you so much for everyone for listening. You can find this podcast on the podcasting platform of your choice. Just search for the GamesIndustry.biz Microcast. We are going to be back next week. Until then, you can get more news, insight, and analysis into the world behind video games at GamesIndustry.biz.